Hello everybody and welcome to another video, and in this one we are talking about fuel octane ratings. What do those numbers that you see at the pump actually mean? Can you make more horsepower by running a higher octane fuel, and is premium gas somehow better for your engine? Let's start off by talking about what these numbers actually mean. An octane rating is essentially a measure of how much compression that air-fuel mixture can withstand before it auto-detonates. It's really important to understand this whenever you're designing an engine. You'll oftentimes notice that most sedans and vehicles out there are able to take regular fuel, but they also have lower compression motors, such as maybe a 10-to-1 ratio. However, performance vehicles might have a compression ratio of say 12.5-to-1 or 13-to-1, and they require more premium fuel because your air and fuel mixture is getting compressed even more, so you don't want that fuel to go off when it's not supposed to. It's a common misconception that higher octane fuels have more energy in it. That's not the case at all. It really all comes down to how stable the fuel is under pressure, and it's really important to preventing engine knock. I actually have a separate video on engine knock. If you want to learn more, you can check it out on my channel. So now let's talk about where these numbers actually come from. The leading authority on measuring fuel octane levels has a special test stand where they use an engine with a variable compression ratio to measure just how much compression a fuel can withstand before it detonates. And they compare this to a mixture of two substances, trimethylpentane and N-heptane. Trimethylpentane has an octane rating of 100, while N-heptane has an octane rating of 0. And if you mix these together, you can get an octane rating that's somewhere in between. So if the fuel that I'm running in my car has the same fuel stability as a 90% mixture of trimethylpentane and N-heptane, it means it's going to have an octane rating of 90%. So this is where these numbers come from. There are a couple of different methods of measuring this, such as the research octane number and motor octane number methodologies, where they basically just vary the temperature of the fuel when it's injected, as well as what RPM the engine is run at. But here in the United States, we actually take the average of the two, and it's called the anti-knock index, and that is how we measure the octane levels of our fuel. So if you happen to go to the pump and you see this R plus M over 2 notation on the fuel pump itself, that's essentially just telling you how the octane level was measured. Now let's talk briefly about ethanol. Ethanol is an alternative form of fuel that uses alcohol produced from processed sugar or corn, and they mix it in with regular gasoline to be able to produce a cleaner burning, less expensive, and in many cases higher octane form of fuel. There's two types of ethanol blends that you can often find out there. You've got E15, which is a 15% mixture of ethanol with 85% gas, and it has an octane rating of 88. E85, it's an 85% mixture of ethanol, 15% gasoline, has an octane rating of 108. Many people who supercharge or turbocharge their cars want to run E85 for that higher octane content, simply because the increased cylinder pressures that you get from that boost means that you want a more stable fuel to be able to unlock the full power potential of your car without running into issues with knock. Fun fact, ethanol content is actually less energetic than gasoline. You need to burn almost 50% more fuel when you're running E85 than you would with regular gasoline. But the higher octane content does mean that you can run more aggressive timing and get more power out of your engine. Also, fun fact, most of your pump gases actually contain 10% ethanol in them. The reason for this is gasoline producers want to mix a little bit of ethanol in there to bump up the octane rating of the fuel, but without increasing the cost. So now let's talk about pricing. Why is premium gas more expensive than regular? I did some research, I looked around in my area, and right now regular gas is going for about $2.33 a gallon, while premium gas is going for $2.80. Part of this comes down to manufacturing costs. Pure gasoline is an octane of about 85. They mix in a 10% ethanol content here in the States, so that brings it up to 87. But if you want to increase the octane level further without mixing in more ethanol, you need to add additional octane boosters and do some additional processing on the gas to be able to bring it up to, say, a 93 octane level. So that adds some cost to it, but it shouldn't really bump the price up that much, maybe another 10 cents more a gallon. A lot of this comes down to just increased demand. So recently, a lot of auto manufacturers have been moving to smaller displacement engines and then slapping a turbo on it. Whenever you do that, you're oftentimes going to need to run at a higher octane fuel to increase the efficiency and power of the engine, just due to the fact that you're forcing more air into those cylinders. So that increased demand, of course, has driven the price up, and part of it just comes down to competition. Not all production plants of gasoline can make premium. Some of them only focus on regular. So there's a lot less competition when it comes to who can manufacture premium gasoline. That's part of the reason why it's more expensive. So now the big question, can you make additional horsepower simply by running a higher octane fuel? The short answer to this is no. Most cars are designed to get the most horsepower out of the minimum octane level that they recommend. Simply running a higher octane fuel in, for instance, a low compression engine is not going to net you any additional power. The only way that this is really going to happen is if the car is not running well. If it's running into a bunch of issues with knock, it's going to force the car to pull timing, and then it's not going to be able to make as much power as it could be. So running a higher octane fuel to try and solve the knock problem may end up netting you some additional horsepower, but it's really just fixing the underlying problem of the knock. In the rare case that your car is equipped with flex fuel capabilities from the factory, it is possible that running higher octane might end up netting you more power, because these cars are capable of sensing the octane rating and the ethanol content of the fuel, and then it adjusts timing according to that. So running higher octane fuel may allow the car to run some more aggressive timing from the factory. But for most of us who don't have flex fuel capabilities, you simply want to be running the minimum octane level that's recommended from the factory so that the car is not running into engine knock issues. The only way to really take advantage of higher octane fuel is to take your car in for a tune, and even that's not necessarily guaranteed to net you any additional horsepower. Not all car manufacturers will tune for what's called MBT, or maximum brake torque. If you don't know what that is, I'll be doing a video on it next week, but basically it means that the car is optimally timed to make the most torque for a given amount of fuel charge that's put into the cylinders. And not all manufacturers will time it optimally. Usually they'll pull it back a few degrees just to make sure you're not risking knock events, just to kind of give you a margin of safety. And if that's the case, you can always time that few degrees back in to be able to make some additional horsepower. However, doing so might risk knock to the engine, so in order to avoid that, you should run a higher octane fuel. So in that case, you might be able to run higher octane fuel with a tune and potentially make a few more horsepower. But if you're not adding any additional modifications to your engine, you're really not going to be netting too much more. You might be able to get 10, even 20 horsepower out of your tune, but the only way to make serious power is to be able to step it up and do something like forced induction, or maybe increase the compression ratio of your motor. And in both cases, that's when it becomes extremely important to run higher octane fuels. And the reason for that is you're going to be getting greatly increased cylinder pressures within your motor. And this means that your regular fuel that you would normally be running is going to have a higher risk of detonation within the cylinder. You can get around running a higher octane fuel if you simply just time the car conservatively, but that means you're really not going to be getting the most out of your engine. If you really want to get the maximum performance from your supercharged or turbocharged car, you really need to be running a fuel such as E85. That way you can time it for MBT and get the most possible horsepower out of your motor. Just understand that if you want to run E85, you can't simply pour it into the gas tank and then go. You need to run a lower air fuel ratio. You need to be running more fuel to get the car to run correctly on E85. So unless you've already installed flex fuel and you've already taken your car in to get a tune, or unless your car is equipped with flex fuel from the factory, you need to consider installing an aftermarket fueling system that has a flex fuel sensor, so it can sense the ethanol content and then it can adjust the tune accordingly, so that way you can get the optimal timing for the particular fuel that you're using. And you could always try and just time it aggressively using 93 octane, and some tuners will even do this, but it does mean that you're at very high risk of really heavy knock, and if you keep getting those knock events, it means you could potentially blow your motor. So the way I like to think of it is that running a higher octane fuel is not really necessarily something you do to get more power out of the engine, but it's something that you do to get reliable power out of the motor, especially in those cases where you're running forced induction. So that is going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give it the thumbs up if you did. Also consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. It really helps the channel out. Thank you guys for watching. See you all in the next one. Later.